So the fascicle that I've been invited to talk about with you this morning is called Mitsugo. And it was published in 1243, which was about 16 years after Dogen returned from his studies in China, and shortly after he left the city of Kyoto for the Eijun Zen province, I believe, about a year before he founded his monastery, Eijun. And at that time, when he left Kyoto, it was the capital of Japan and the center of the imperial court. And I mention this because I feel like it's a detail of the context in which this fascicle was written that is somewhat relevant. I'll say something more about that in a bit. I've been studying 3 different translations of the fascicle, and each one has translated the title differently. The earliest translation that I believe was Kaz Tanahashi's, and he translated it intimate language. The Nishijima Cross translation is secret talk, and the most recent translation by the Soto Zen text project is secret words. I've been deeply studying and reflecting on this fascicle for a couple of months now, and my intended approach to talking about it has continued to turn and has been turning all the way up until yesterday. So we'll see what happens. One of the points of deep consideration that has remained foregrounded is the influences of numerous early Chan teachings on Dogen's teaching, evidenced by his many very condensed references to early Chan teachings in his writings. And I was struck this time more so than in the past by the extent to which Dogen's writing is a conversation with the ancestors of this lineage. With that in mind, I've been keenly aware of how Mitsugo, as Dogen talks about it, goes far beyond Dogen in both the ultimate timeless sense, but also in the temporal and historical sense. And I'll say a little bit about that. In the temporal historical sense, the word Mitsugo, in its literal translation being secret words, the word Mitsugo was prominent in Japan, used prominently by other Buddhist sects, particularly in the Tendai and Shingon school, to refer to esoteric, kind of hidden, encoded teachings that were part of mantra, mandala, mudra teachings. And those teachings were understood to provide access to high spiritual truths and powers, and were secret to all those who were uninitiated by others initiated in esoteric knowledge. And the ability of initiates to perform ceremonial rites in the imperial court in Dogen's day was highly valued and expected, is my understanding. And Dogen wasn't so keen on that. He didn't believe in hidden teachings. And in many of his pieces, he makes reference to considering Buddhist practitioners who participated in these kinds of ceremonies to be currying favor from the aristocracy, which he saw as a corruption of the Buddha Dharma. So in this fascicle, his use of the word Mitsugo posits a very different meaning than the literal meaning. And not only does he posit a different meaning, he actually offers something of a critique of the meaning in those esoteric systems. I feel as though I've only just begun to study Dogen's work deeply enough to begin to fathom the tide that he was up against in his life, and for that to begin to inform my understanding of so much of the vehemence that we can hear in many of Dogen's writings. So that's just a little bit of historical context in which the fascicle was written. When I said that the teaching of Mitsugo goes beyond Dogen in the temporal sense as well as in the ultimate sense, I was primarily referring to the long succession of ancestors that gave rise to Dogen's teaching. From his own perspective, the truth of Mitsugo spans the entire lineage of Zen seamlessly, all the way back to Shakyamuni Buddha. And the Mitsugo that Dogen taught is not only taught as seamless, but also as fully revealed and universal. That being said, Dogen did acknowledge that what is fully revealed is often not recognized or understood. And the following is a passage from the fascicle in which Dogen clearly states his meaning of Mitsugo, secret words. This is a translation from the Soto Zen text project. Secret means the principle of intimacy. It is without interruption. It covers the Buddhas and ancestors. It covers you. It covers me. It covers practice. It covers the generations. It covers our effort. It covers the secret. The meeting of the secret words with the secret person, even the Buddha eye cannot see. This fascicle is a teaching story that consists of many teaching stories, which means the life of many Zen practitioners in a way that demonstrates how Dogen, his teaching exists within a much larger story, freshly contributes to that story. And he also highlights in this fascicle a number of significant turning points in the conversation of the lineage. Turning points associated with particularly important Zen ancestors. So I'll just attempt to unpack a little bit of this, the language in the fascicle, in a way that helps to reveal some of those stories, and in doing so to demystify some of the language that I think was not meant to be mystifying. These teachings, his writing, I gather were primarily for people, for contemporaries who were knowledgeable about, familiar with many of the old teaching stories that he references in such an abbreviated fashion in his fascicles. So here's the first sentence from the Mitsugo fascicle, which is, as I said, a very condensed. I think this sentence, I want to say this now so you can maybe listen to it in this way, expresses the heart of the entire fascicle in a very abbreviated manner, and I'll unpack it a bit. I'll read two translations. The first is from the Soto Zen text project, and I'll just say in advance that this sentence consists of several quotes. So Dogen is quoting a story, and I won't read all the quotes to you, otherwise you won't hear what's in between the quotation marks, but most of it, other than the first few words and the last few words, is Dogen quoting. When you express the great way that the Buddhas bear in mind as the realized koan, The words, "You're also like this, I'm also like this, protect it well," have verified the accord in the present. So, you know that emoji that has the eyes? It's sort of like that the first time I read it. The second translation is a little bit more accessible, I think. This is Kaz Tanahashi's translation. Actualizing the fundamental point, you realize the great road maintained by all Buddhas. You are like this, I am like this, keep it well, is revealed. So the great road maintained by all Buddhas is the Zen lineage. You are like this, I am like this, is a quote from an older Zen teaching story, a conversation between a teacher and a student. And yet I think as an opening line, Dogen was saying, echoing the wisdom of the ancestors, when you express the great way, when you or when we actualize the fundamental point, we are realizing and verifying what has been revealed and verified by all Buddhas. You are like this, I am like this, means fundamentally no difference. No separation, no hidden esoteric initiation required. He goes on, keep it well. I used to think that keep it well, when I heard it, meant primarily don't forget, don't go back to sleep, don't lose sight of what you have realized. But in studying this fascicle, my understanding kind of widened and became less individualistic. And I now think that he means, now you have it, intimately communicate it, maintain the great road maintained by all Buddhas. For those of you less versed in than Dogen's contemporaries in the old teaching stories, as am I, this opening line that I read to you is a highly distilled reference to a famous conversation between the sixth ancestor, Weinong, and his student, Nanyue. And I'll read the rendition of that conversation in the form of a koan from Dogen's Book of 100 Selected Koans, translated by Kaz Tanahashi. Nanyue went to meet Weinong, and when he arrived, Weinong said, "What is it that thus comes?" So imagine, what is it that thus comes? Nanyue didn't have an answer. So he stayed and he studied with him for several years until one day he went to Weinong and said, "When I first arrived, you asked me, what is it that comes like this? I understand now." Weinong asked, "How do you understand?" Nanyue said, "To say that it is like something misses it." Weinong said, "Does it depend on practice and enlightenment?" Nanyue said, "It's not that there is no practice and enlightenment. It is just that it cannot be defiled." Weinong said, "Just this non-defilement is what the Buddhas have maintained and transmitted. You are like this. I am like this. Ancestors in India were like this. Guard it well." I think it's worth mentioning that Weinong, the teacher in this conversation, was considered the founder of the Southern School, or the Sudden School, which wasn't actually a school, but it was a movement in Chan away from the notion of enlightenment dependent upon long, progressive, step-by-step purification and scriptural study, and toward an orientation to practice enlightenment based on one's own inherent Buddha nature. not dependent on words and letters, or not dependent on scriptures. Or to Dogen's point in this fascicle, not dependent on secret words. About 100 or 150 years after that conversation between Weinong and Dangshan, one of the founders of the Soto Zen school, or the Caodong school in China, Dangshan, wrote the poem Song of the Precious Mere Samadhi, which is chanted here during morning service. And the opening lines of that poem read, "The teaching of thusness has been intimately communicated by Buddhas and ancestors. Now you have it, so keep it well." Echoing Weinong's teaching 5 generations later. So these stories are all within this long road of the Buddhas and ancestors that we heard earlier. And I think it could reasonably be said that the long road is nothing more than maintaining these encounters and sharing these stories that depict the expressions of intimate language. Or, to quote Dogen, the principle of intimacy that is without interruption, that pervades the Buddhas and ancestors, the meeting of the secret words with the secret person. Sorry, that's the first line of the fascicle. Following that opening line, Dogen goes on immediately to reference another famous teaching story. So this is what I'm saying about Dogen's teaching being these conversations with the ancestors. The second story is a story that marks the beginning of the Zen lineage. It's the very first transmission story in the 30-volume collection of teaching stories written in China in the 11th century. In English, the translation of that collection is the record of the transmission of the lamp. And in Japanese, it's called the Denko Roku. My Chinese pronunciation is very poor, but I believe it's the Jingde Chuangdeng Lu. And the first story in that collection depicts the transmission from Shakyamuni Buddha to Mahakashapa. So the very beginning of Buddhism. The setting of that story is known as the Flower Sermon, said to have taken place in India on Vulture Peak, a famous site of so many of the Buddha's teachings. And that would have been approximately 1,000 years before Buddhism reached China, I believe. So as I was saying, in the second the second story in the fascicle, there's a reference to the first transmission story. It's not the actual transmission story. It's presented as an interaction between Master Junju and Junju Daoying, a disciple of Dangshan. So we hear this lineage. There's Weinong to his disciple Nanyue, and then Dangshan 500 years later, echoing these same words. And now a disciple of Dangshan. So it's a conversation between this master and an unnamed eminent minister. This interaction also appears somewhere in the transmission of the lamp, but it's not clear to me exactly where or how well Dogen's depiction of it in the fascicle represents the original story. So this is the Soto Zen Text Project's translation. Great Master Hongzhi of Mount Junju was once asked by an official presenting offerings. The world-honored one had secret words. For Kashapa, they are not concealed. What are the secret words of the world-honored one? The great master called him, Master. Imagine this. He's just asked a question. He's right before him, and the master said, Minister. And the minister responds. It doesn't say how he responds. Presumably he said yes, or just widened his eyes. And the master said, "Do you understand?" And the minister said, "I don't understand." The great master said, "If you don't understand, it's the secret words of the world honored one, the Buddha. If you do understand, it's not concealed for Kashyapa." In order to understand the minister's question, one needs to know the actual story of the flower sermon in the transmission of the lamp. In brief, the story is that the Buddha, before an assembly of hundreds of thousands or millions, I've heard different figures, the Buddha raised a flower and blinked, and Mahakashyapa smiled. So implied by the question of the minister is there must have been some secret communication between the Buddha and Mahakashyapa, because no one else, as the story goes in the assembly, seemed to recognize the Buddha's meaning. So the minister asked the master, what was the secret? Then what happens? The master calls him minister and asks, "Do you understand?" You could say that the master was showing him the secret words, showing him the intimate language. But the minister didn't understand, even though it wasn't hidden. And that conversation sets the stage, so to speak, for the remainder of what Dogen has to say about Mitsuko in this fascicle, beginning with what Mitsuko is not. The following is a quote regarding what Mitsuko is not. In sum, the world-honored one has secret words, has secret practice, has secret verification. However, ignoramuses think that secret means others do not know, but we ourselves know. That there are people who know and people who do not know. From Sind in the west to the land of the east, from ancient time to the present, those who think and say this have not studied the way of the Buddhas. Throughout the fascicle, as in many of Dogen's writings, he is wielding words in ways that cut through our habitual, ordinary, conceptual understandings and misunderstandings, as he would describe them. And perhaps more to the point, he's cutting through our belief in the ability of conceptual thinking to reach what he and all the Buddha ancestors have been pointing to, truth beyond conceptualization. At the same time, one of the important things that Dogen's saying in this fascicle is that outside of, as the saying goes, outside of words and letters, beyond concepts, includes words and letters, includes speech. So it includes words, and words are used in the expression of intimate language. And at the same time, it cannot be said. To this point, the following are a few short excerpts from the fascicle. It is not that we have been studying as secret words some realm that we ourselves do not know. The very moment when we do not understand the Buddha Dharma, this is secret words in one part. It is precisely when we meet a person that we hear secret words and speak secret words. When we know ourselves, we know secret practice. And in the very next paragraph, he says, secret practice is not something known by self or others. The secret self alone knows it. The secret others are each, quote, I don't understand, unquote. Because the secret is rather with you. And that last part of the sentence, the secret is rather with you, there's a footnote that quotes the original source. What I'm telling you here is not the secret. If you reflect on your own face before your parents were born, the secret is rather with you. That was said by Wei Nong's teacher, Hong Ren. I don't have a timepiece, so I have no idea how I'm doing for time. Is anyone able to tell me if I've gone way over my time already?
You have not.
Great. I'll have some water. I've often found that a passage or a turn of phrase from one of Dogen's other fascicles is like, how does the expression go? Using a thorn to remove a thorn. That a passage from one of his other fascicles helps me to clarify something in the fascicle that I'm studying. And this time I actually went looking for some elucidation in one of his other fascicles. By the name of Yui Butsu Yo Butsu, only a Buddha and a Buddha, or in other words, only Buddha. And this is what I found that I think is relevant and might help understand some of what Dogen is saying in this fascicle. When you understand this, a moment of beyond understanding does not come and hinder understanding. And understanding does not break beyond understanding. Instead, understanding and beyond understanding are just like spring and autumn. However, when you do not understand, the pervasive voice of Dharma does not reach your ears. In the midst of the voice, your ears dally about. But when you understand, the voice has already reached your ears. Do not think that understanding is small and beyond understanding is large. Know that beyond understanding cannot be discerned by a self. The Dharma King's understanding is just like this. So I don't know if that clarified anything for you, but somehow it shed light for me. Dogen concludes his fascicle with a verse and his commentary upon it. And the verse was written by Shuedo, the teacher of Dogen's teacher, Rujing. And I find it extraordinary the way that this poetic verse somehow brilliantly contains and reflects the distilled meaning of the entire fascicle. I'll end with the verse. The world-honored one has secret words. For Kashyapa, they are not concealed. Throughout the night, a rain of falling blossoms. In the whole city, the streams are fragrant. The world-honored one has secret words. For Kashyapa, they are not concealed. Throughout the night, a rain of falling blossoms. In the whole city, the streams are fragrant. Thank you for your attention.